giving this talk, the financial freedom number talk. What's your financial freedom? And taking people through a process where, first of all, you look at, say, okay, if you were to retire today, right now, how much would you want to be spending on an annual basis? And so you get people to think about that. And then they all write down what their number would be. Although it's different for everybody, because some will say, I'm going to retire in India, or I'm going to retire in Mexico. Others are saying, I'm going to retire in New York City, even though I'm currently working in India or Mexico. For this woman, she took let's say it was $60,000. She multiplied it by 25. You ask about being angry. This woman, she stands up. I still remember it. It's in Bangkok. She stands up. There's an auditorium of 400 people. You can just see she stands up. She's like, and she's breathing like this. And she says, hey, are you telling me that I need $2.5 million to retire? And I said, no. You told you that. Example for somebody. That was your number. You did your math based on your...
इन्वेस्टमेंट बहुत ही ज़्यादा सिंपल होती है, लेकिन लोग उसको कॉम्प्लिकेटेड बना देते हैं। और इस कॉम्प्लिकेटेड सब्जेक्ट को थोड़ा सा डीबग करने के लिए मैंने आज एंड्रयू हालम के साथ पॉडकास्ट की है। पॉडकास्ट इंग्लिश के अंदर है, मेरे इंग्लिश चैनल के ऊपर ऑलरेडी अपलोड हो गई होगी, लेकिन आप जब ये देखेंगे तो आप क्योंकि वहाँ पर इंग्लिश ऑडियंस कम है, छोटी है, उस पर व्यूज़ कम आते हैं, प्लस ये कि उस पर ऑलरेडी सिर्फ 3,500 सब्सक्राइबर्स हैं, तो अगर आपने सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया तो उसको सब्सक्राइब कर सकते हैं। लेकिन इस चैनल के ऊपर मैंने इससे पहले भी कुछ इंग्लिश पॉडकास्ट अपलोड की हैं और मैंने शुरू में उसमें इंट्रो में बता दिया है, इसी वजह से ताकि लोग कंफ्यूज ना हो। एंड्रयू हालम बहुत ही ज़बरदस्त किस्म के ऑथर हैं, चीज़ों को ब्रेक डाउन करते हैं सिंपल लैंग्वेज के अंदर। ये उनकी एक बुक थी जो कि मैंने सरवा के एक इवेंट के अंदर मुझको मिली थी और मैंने उस वक्त पढ़ा था, बैलेंस के नाम से बुक है। लेकिन उनकी एक्चुअल बुक है एक्सपर्ट मिलियनियर, वो भी बहुत अच्छी बुक है। बड़ी इंसाइटफुल चीज़ें उसके अंदर। जब मैं सिंप्लीफाई का ग्रुप है जिसके थ्रू मैं एंड्रयू हालम को जाना हूँ, उसके अंदर जब मैं सुनता हूँ कुछ लोगों की चीज़ें जो कि उन्होंने उस बुक से कोट की हुई होती हैं, तो मुझे पता चलता है कि वो बुक भी बहुत अच्छी होगी। इन बुक्स के जो लिंक्स हैं वो नीचे कमेंट्स में दिए हुए हैं, आप या डिस्क्रिप्शन में दिए हुए हैं, उसको आप जाके देख सकते हैं। अवार्ड विनिंग ऑथर हैं, बहुत क्लैरिटी है दिमाग में, टीचर थे किसी ज़माने में, वाइफ शायद आज भी टीचिंग करती हैं, और कैनेडियन थे और सिंगापुर में टीचिंग की उन्होंने और बहुत सारे काम किए। पर्सनल फाइनेंस के ऑथर थे, किसी ज़माने में पर्सनल फाइनेंस के लिखते थे, फिर ये बुक्स लिखने लगे। तो बहुत ही डाइवर्स किस्म का उनका एक एक्सपीरियंस है, डाइवर्स किस्म के थॉट्स हैं जो कि बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है लोगों को समझने के लिए कि जो लोग इस तरह की थॉट्स रखते हैं वो किस तरह सोचते हैं और क्या-क्या अपनी ज़िंदगी में अचीव कर सकते हैं, बगैर अपनी लाइफ को डिस्टर्ब किए हुए इन मैनी वेज़। जैसे ये बुक है, इसका नाम बैलेंस है। बाय द वे ये कोई मेजर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स के ऊपर नहीं है। ये बुक जो उन्होंने लिखी है, ये बेसिकली लिखी इस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कि अपनी लाइफ में बैलेंस कैसे क्रिएट किया जाए, फ्रॉम इन्वेस्टमेंट्स, फ्रॉम सेविंग्स, और अपनी थॉट प्रोसेस को कैसे चेंज किया जाए। आई होप कि इस वीडियो के अंदर आपको वैल्यू मिली हो, और वैल्यू मिली हो तो प्लीज़ लाइक कर दें इस वीडियो को और सब्सक्राइब कर दें इस चैनल को, और इंग्लिश चैनल को भी सब्सक्राइब कर दें। विदाउट फर्दर डू, let's begin.
Thank you very much, Andrew, to accept my invite on this podcast. I've been a fan of yours through this Facebook group of Simplify. I am not aware about you personally at all. This is the first time I'm talking to you. In the beginning, we've just talked about each other. So I talked about myself already, so you know about a bit of mine, my whatever I'm doing. Now I want you to, because a lot of people from my channel might not know you because I'm coming from a different background. So if you can just introduce yourself and then we can continue. Wow, that's an open question, Wali. Introduce yourself. So yeah, my name is Andrew Hallam, and I started my career as, I guess I had two careers running simultaneously. One was as a high school teacher. So I started my career as actually a middle school teacher. I taught English and then high school English. And at the same time, I was also a personal finance journalist. So I was writing for a Canadian magazine called Money Sense. And I was also doing articles for Canada's national newspaper, which is the Globe and Mail. So it was quite interesting having these two careers running concurrently. And when I left Canada in 2002, I decided that I would take a year off just to travel. And I had, with the public school that I was working at, there was a really great program called a deferred salary leave.
And very few people took advantage of this. But essentially, it was that if you signed up for this thing, you could have the school district take a percentage of your income each month, and they would hold it. And so you could say the one that I signed up for was called a 3 and 1. So the school district took 33% of my pre-tax income. And the idea is that after 3 years of that, the fourth year, they give me the full year off and they pay me back that money with interest. And the idea is that I can have my job back at the end of my year off. So I thought this was a fantastic opportunity to see much of the world because it was something that I didn't even really need to save money for. Every month I would just get paid. And each month, as it turned out, I ended up getting more than I was previously getting when I was working, only because I was getting basically 66% of my pay. So 33% of my pay went into the system for 3 years. And then I was getting 100% of my annual monthly income during this year that I had off. And instead of going back to Canada, which was my full intention, my full intention was to go back. I got an email when I was in Morocco from a high school principal who I worked with in Canada. And he had taken a job at Singapore American School. So it's the world's largest single campus international school and that had 4,000 students. So age, say, 5 to 18 years of age. 54 different nationalities represented in the student body. And he said to me, "This is a great place to work. Why don't you apply?" And he set up an opportunity for me to meet the superintendent at a job fair in Boston. I went there, I had lunch with the guy, and a couple of days later, he called me and offered me a position teaching high school English. And while I was there, because in Canada, just to back up a little bit, in Canada, people generally, if they're school teachers, they don't really have to worry so much about investing for their future because they get great government pensions. So the school district has you contribute to a teacher's pension. And at the end, when you retire, it can be fabulous if you have a home and you've paid off your home. By then, your children are usually out of the house. And you can end up getting about 70% of your previous income level upon retirement indexed to inflation. Then when we move abroad like that, so when I moved to this private school in Singapore, there were loads of Canadians and Americans and Indians and Australians, and there's a whole collection of different people working there and teaching at that school. But none of them are getting one of these defined benefit pension schemes. And so people knowing that I was also a personal finance journalist started asking me like, "Hey, how do I actually invest?" And one of the things too, Wally, that I found was that you would get these financial service providers, these financial planners that would come through the school 3 or 4 times a year, and they would sell absolute garbage, horrific high fee investment schemes. And so teachers asked me, first of all, when I looked at some of these platforms and I started to talk to a few of the teachers, they realized, wow, we should ask this guy to give some seminars on investing. And so I started to do that. And then eventually I started to sort of complement the writing that I was doing on the side for magazines. I thought I should probably write a book. And so I wrote a book called Millionaire Teacher. And the first edition of that was published in 2011. It became the best-selling personal finance book in the United States. So it hit #1 for every Amazon-related category that related to money in the US and in Canada and in Singapore. The publisher at that point, if you ever have the fortune to end up with a best-selling book, What the publishers will typically like to do is they want to then serialize it. So Millionaire Teacher, they wanted me to write a Millionaire Teacher for women, Millionaire Teacher for retirees, Millionaire Teacher for teenagers, Millionaire Teacher for dogs and cats, right? They really want to milk it. It's kind of like when you have a movie that ends up doing really well, Hollywood wants to bang out sequels. And so as maybe potentially lucrative as that might have been, I thought, I didn't really want to do that. I had a day job that I really enjoyed. And if I were to write another book at all, I would want to write it for people who had left their home countries, who weren't contributing to a defined benefit government pension scheme, who were essentially on their own, and they had to make it or not based on their own merits, based on their own savings, based on their own initiative with smart investing. So I realized that for me, there was a niche market there. It was a small market. It wasn't like the market I had with the book Millionaire Teacher, which was a much broader one. Essentially, I wrote that for people living in their home countries. And the main target audiences really were the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. And to a point, Singapore as well. But I would get these messages from people that would say, like, whatever, I'm from India. I'm living in Cairo working at this telecommunications company. How do I invest the way you described in Millionaire Teacher? And, I'd get people from all over the world, all kinds of different nationalities, living in all kinds of different places, sending me emails and messages, asking me these questions. And I would try to find out these answers for the people. And as I did that, I realized, wow, I actually have established almost a vault of information that I need to share. And so when the publisher said to me, like, look, please, let's do another edition of Millionaire Teacher. Let's serialize it. We'll take you out for dinner. And they were always offering to take me out for dinner. Like, we'll take you out for dinner and we're going to make this really sweet for you. It got to the point where they even said to me, we went out for dinner and they said, okay, look, we know you don't want to do another one. But what we'll do is we'll get somebody else to write it for you. And we'll put your name on it. And we don't have to use their name, but they can just talk to you a little bit. And that's when I realized, like, the power of a brand. And I learned too that you have a novelist like James Patterson who churns out 9 to 12 novels a year. And I found out that he has 9 full-time writers on the roster. So if you actually pick up a James Patterson novel, it will say like James Patterson. And then in small print, it'll say like, with Joe Schmo. And it's generally that Joe Schmo has written it, but it's followed the same kind of pattern. So at one of those dinners where the publisher was trying to schmooze me, I said, I want to write a book for people not living in their home country. And that's essentially how Millionaire Expat came to be. And the publisher did fight it. They said, like, this isn't a great idea. You already got a really big audience in the United States and in Canada. Why go for a really small audience? And the reason I described was these people need it. There is no other book that describes this. And so because there isn't, how are these people really going to learn this stuff? So if I write this, I can truly help people. If I write another edition of Millionaire Teacher, it will compete with, and it might do very well, but it's still one of several books from which people could choose. And sure, it could be impactful for those people, but with Millionaire Expat, it was the only one that an expat really could go to for information. And so that's what I did. And that book's now in its 3rd edition.
Wow. I didn't know about that at all. I mean, this is a huge information for me that what was your story, because I've always seen your posts about teachers and teaching. Now I come to know that why you're always so focused on this specific profession, because you are associated with that, and because of that, you still want them to be thriving. One thing I want to ask you, you said in the beginning that for once you were with this 3 years in Canada, and for your job, they were taking out your 33% of income and then investing, or let's say saving it, and then they were giving you, for this 1 year gap that you were taking, they were giving you the full salary. So what you're saying, let's say they're if you're getting $1,000 paid, they will not pay you $1,000. They will pay you $700 for 3 years, and then in 1 year they will pay you $1,000. Right? If I'm correct, this is how it's working. So basically, they're not giving you anything extra.
Right.
They
Exactly.
are they were keeping the interest to themselves.
They
They're
paid the
only paying
interest
you.
though. Yeah, fortunately they did give me interest.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, they
okay.
did give me interest. And of course, anyone listening to this would say, wait a sec, wouldn't it have been better for Andrew to actually invest that money on his own, quit his job, and then come back? But the challenge there was that it was very difficult at the time to get a teaching job in that district. So it was
Hmm,
one of the most popular districts in the country. And so
hmm,
I knew that if I quit and took a year off, which I could
hmm,
have because I did have enough money to do that, it might have been really tough for me to get back into that school district. As it turns out,
hmm,
I didn't actually have to because
hmm,
I ended up taking this other job and I stayed overseas until I started working at the school in 2003. And I
hmm,
stayed overseas at that school in Singapore until 2014. And my wife, who I met in Singapore, she's teaching high school Spanish. So she's an American teaching high school Spanish. She said to me about halfway through 2014, she said, I need a break. Let's take a year off. And at this point, I was 44. We had been financially independent at that point for several years. And so I thought, yeah, let's do that. We can take a year off, we can travel, and then we can find a job, maybe back at this school. And if that doesn't work out, perhaps another school. And it didn't have to pay well, but because we knew that we already had money. And so as it turned out, though, we extended that to 2 years and we traveled so much and we loved it. We met so many people, exposing ourselves to so many different cultures. I kept writing my regular investment columns. And then the demand started to pick up to have me come to places to give talks and seminars. And I didn't have to really advertise that. I didn't have an agent. I wasn't part of a speaker's bureau. But word of mouth started to spread. And there was one 6-month period where I decided that, I think it was a 5-month period where I decided that I would say yes to every proposal, every offer to speak. And of course, we had lots of time. I said, okay, let's just do this. And during that period, it was a 5-month period. I gave 91 talks in 13 different countries in
wow.
that 5-month period. And I realized, wow, a couple of different things. One, I really enjoyed it because in a way I was back in a classroom, but it was a different kind of classroom. And so I was speaking with adults at companies and at international schools, and I was sometimes speaking to students. And some of the companies were huge companies like Johnson and Johnson and BlackRock and Facebook. And then some of them are smaller companies. But I really just enjoyed speaking with people and helping them through this process.
Wow. Okay, so there are so many things I want to check with you. The first thing is about this book. This I got from when I was having a seminar with Sarva. They provided this. This is Balance. You didn't mention about this book. So how many books did you publish so far?
If you are a resident of a GCC country and you want to invest in the US stock, I have got one platform for you which I invest through as well. This is called as Sarva. Sarva has three modules which you can invest through. One is Sarva Invest, the other one is Sarva Trade, and then Sarva Save. All three modules provide you the investment opportunities that you want, and you can invest in the US stocks. It can be Microsoft, it can be Amazon, it can be Google, any individual companies you want to invest in, or you want to invest in the ETFs, or you want to invest through Sarva Invest, which is a platform that basically does not require you to have any kind of financial knowledge. If you want to open the account with this platform, the link is in the description. You can use that link and you will get $50 of referral bonus once you open the account and transfer the funds. Terms and condition apply. Now let's get back to the video.
I did 2 editions of Millionaire Teacher,
Okay.
and I've done 3 editions of Millionaire Expat, and then in 2022, I published that book, Balance, which, in my opinion, is the most important book that I've written.
Yes. Yes.
Because in my opinion, it looks holistically at the role of money and the role of success. It looks at and challenges a traditional definition of success. So when you ask somebody a question, for example, like, what is success to you? In most cases, people will define it based on something career oriented or something monetary. And so then when you dig a little further and you ask a question, why do you want more money? Or why do you want a better career or a different career, a higher paying career, a higher status career? Generally speaking, when you keep digging with that question, why, ultimately their answer comes down to happiness or life satisfaction. When you ask somebody, hey, you've got a Ferrari, why do you have a Ferrari? And it's a weird question to ask, but I love to ask those sorts of questions. And people will say, well it's fantastic. I love it. So you feel that your life is better as a result of you having it. Yeah, absolutely. So I thought, okay, now this is interesting, because everything we do is associated with at least our perception of what will give us higher life satisfaction. Why don't I take life satisfaction and reverse engineer it to see what does the research truly say enhances life satisfaction? And so let's look at what the research says with respect to what enhances life satisfaction. And then if we can identify those things, then and only then can we really identify what success is. So in the book Balance, I looked at success as a 4-legged table. Yes, we need some money. Yes, we do. We need shelter. We need to have enough money so that we have access to good medical. It's nice to have enough money so that we don't stress about feeding ourselves and feeding our family, and that we don't stress whether as we get older that we're going to have the means to continue to enjoy the lifestyle that we have now, even if we're not working, based on choice or based on a forced decision by somebody else. We also, though, need, when you're looking at life satisfaction, a huge component of that is relationships. So when you look at the Harvard study of adult development, which is a 9-decade-long study, looking at what is it that truly enhances life satisfaction, the common denominator isn't money or career. The common denominator there is your relationships. Are they solid? Do you have a good relationship with yourself and with the people around you? Do you love people? Do they love you? I call that sociological mathematics. What you give to the world in terms of love and respect is what you get back. The third leg of the table is a sense of purpose. So if you were born rich, you never had to work. If you look at those people, generally, most of them are really unhappy because there's no purpose to their lives. There's nothing that excites them, that gets them up in the morning. You often see a lot of those people just in misery, often falling into things like drug addictions. And then the fourth leg, of course, is maximizing your health to the best of your capability. And so the 4 legs of the table: money, health, relationships, and a sense of purpose. If we can work on those 4 legs of the table, then we can truly be successful, because success is life satisfaction. That's what success is.
Awesome. I was reading through this book, and there was one term that you mentioned there, and I think you've created that term, which is a desert island litmus test. I love that term because mostly you talked about Ferrari. So I'm living in, let's say, UAE. If you buy a Camry, people will have Honda Accord. If you buy a Honda Accord, the people will have BMW, and then Mercedes, then G-Wagon, whatever. I mean, then Ferrari, Lamborghini. There is no limit to it. So what exactly is this desert island litmus test? Because a lot of people I talk to, they are obsessed with something they drive, and I'm 100% sure that they are trying to impress someone, but they're
Yeah.
subconsciously not saying that. So what is exactly this desert island litmus test?
Yeah, it stems into the most irrational component of what it is to be a human being. In that, first of all, we often buy things to impress other people. And so the and then the irony there is that it doesn't work. So for example, if I drive a Ferrari, am I going to be more loved by people around me? The answer is no. If anything, people are going to be jealous of me. And jealousy is the opposite of love. They're not going to treat me all that nicely if they're jealous of me. So there's an element there. But the deserted island litmus test, or the desert island litmus test, is one where I can say, okay, first of all, we know that based on, we'll use cars as an example, based on the research that Michigan State University did on life satisfaction or satisfaction with respect to buying vehicles. People that drive high-end cars don't enjoy their driving experience any more than people that drive mid-range cars, simply because we get used to whatever it is that we're driving. We often think we enjoy our high-end Mercedes-Benz more than we would have enjoyed driving a Honda Accord. But because of hedonic adaptability, it's like a sugar fix. We buy it, we're excited about it, we feel great, we feel how tight it is, the acceleration is amazing, but soon it just becomes this thing that gets us from A to B. And people don't respect us anymore or love us anymore because we actually have this vehicle. Now, that research is compelling, but it truly showed that based on what they call experiential happiness, because we get used to what we own, there's no added level to life satisfaction through owning an expensive vehicle. But now, let's say in some rare cases, there are examples. The deserted island or the desert island litmus test lets you figure out whether you are one of those cases. So let's say you want a Porsche. The question here is, if you lived on a desert island and no one else could see it, would you still buy it and own it? Let's say that desert island had a series of mountain roads. Would you still own the Porsche? Would you still buy the Porsche? Would you still work really, really, really hard to come up with a whole bunch of money to buy the Porsche? If the answer is yes, then you are buying the Porsche for the right reasons. You truly appreciate that German engineering. But if the answer is no, then you're buying that vehicle for somebody else. And the irony there is people don't love us or respect us anymore because of what we drive.
100%. Absolutely in line with you. So you coming from a background I mean, I might not be, I should not be stereotyping that, but let's say usually teachers are thought to be um, not better with finances. This is at least what I've seen in my country, or coming from South Asia. I know this is the case. Even they're not paid properly, and they're not financially savvy. And this is not stereotype, because I have seen a lot of even finance professionals. They are not finance savvies as well. I mean, even I've seen MBAs, chartered accountants. Sometimes they are not good with their own money. So, but talking about teachers, so how come you've mentioned that you've written in newspapers back home in Canada? So, is that the reason that you were always having this kind of knowledge and thought processes, that you were always good with money, or is it something
Yeah.
else?
Now it's kind of interesting because I guess we can back this up a little bit too, and we can look at which professions are actually good with money based on the research. So not based on what we anecdotally observe, but based on the research. based on the research, ironically, teachers are actually really good with money. They don't earn a lot. And I think they tend to have generally high levels of education, but low levels of earnings that are related to their level of education. And so I'm not saying that teachers have a high level of financial literacy, but I'm saying that compared to other professions, it's actually a lot higher than we might think. It's higher with respect to the behavior as well. So when we look at professions that have low levels of behavioral financial literacy, and that's the really important part, is the behavioral level of financial literacy. Doctors and lawyers tend to be the worst. So when we look at net worth relative to income, doctors and lawyers have the lowest. And there are several reasons for that. One of them is that when somebody becomes a doctor, obviously their income is solid, it's high. When they become a lawyer, generally these are two of the higher paid positions. The doctors and lawyers, however, decide generally there's a pressure for them to start living like doctors and lawyers.
The high life.
And so there's an interesting cycle here because they'll buy an expensive car because other people at the hospital also have expensive cars. Lawyers will buy expensive cars because you'll see other people at the law firm also have expensive cars. Likewise with houses, they'll buy much bigger houses or much more expensive houses than they really should or could afford. Just because you can afford to make the payments doesn't mean you can really afford it. So that's the essence where there's money that's not available for them to actually invest it. So it was something that Thomas Stanley found in the United States, where interestingly, when it comes to behavioral financial literacy, teachers were actually at near the top of the list. There's a fascinating bit of research too that your listeners might find surprising. And it had to do with, it came from the Dave Ramsey Institute. I'm certainly not recommending that you go out and listen to Dave Ramsey's radio show. It's super popular in the United States. The guy is kind of crass and not exactly kind-hearted when speaking to people. Generally, it's a radio show. People call in, they ask questions. Dave Ramsey often calls them stupid. But the Dave Ramsey Institute did a study in the United States to see which professions had or at least the highest number of millionaires per profession. And what was really interesting was how high teachers were on that scale relative to their income. It's kind of surprising that obviously there are more teachers than there are other professionals. So you're going to expect numerically, if you're looking at the data, that you're going to see a bias that way. But there was a fairly high number of school teachers that were among the millionaires. So that in itself was kind of interesting. But I would say, to your point, if you asked me, are teachers financially literate? I would say generally all professions are illiterate financially on aggregate. All on aggregate. That is not saying that you can't have people who are physicians or lawyers who are absolutely behaviorally financially literate. Certainly there are. But I would say that by and large, the world is behaviorally financially illiterate.
I completely agree with you. And when I mentioned that, I forgot to mention that I'm talking about South Asia, because in South Asia, they're underpaid as well in most of the cases. So it's coming from that perspective. But you are right. I saw that study from Dave Ramsey, and he mentioned that it's not about whatever you're making, which is in case of lawyers and doctors, they make a lot of money in the US, but they are not compared to what they're making. They're not saving, or they're not accumulating that kind of wealth compared to teachers. So that is perfectly fine. The other thing I want to talk to you is, a lot of times we discuss, and a lot of people ask me as well, that why is it not mandatory to teach personal finance in schools? And you being teacher, and by the way, which subject did you teach in the school?
At Singapore American School, I taught high school English and high school personal finance. But
Okay.
you are absolutely right, Wali.
Mhm.
Personal finance should be a mandatory course. I look at the wasted time with respect to, say, something like really high level mathematics courses. The vast majority of us, I would probably go to say 95% of us, aren't using the mathematics that we were taught after the age of 15 or 16. Once we start getting into things like trigonometry, how many people actually use those skills in everyday life? Sure, you'll get some engineers using them. You get a couple of other professionals. My argument here is that courses like that should become electives. So mathematics, after about the age of 12, when you learn to multiply, divide fractions, maybe some very basic algebra, after that, it's largely superfluous for probably 99% of the population. Yet, we have these mandatory classes in schools. What is 100% usable for everybody is financial education, because every decision that we make going forward has a financial component to it. Whenever we're buying groceries on a day-to-day basis, we need a sense of financial literacy when we're not just buying a house or investing, but just the small day-to-day things as well. So yeah, in my opinion, and I know I'm right with this. I'm never ever going to say that I'm 100% right in very many things. I know I'm going to die at some point. I'm 100% convinced with that. But I also believe that I am 100% convinced that the two content courses that we're shortchanged in a traditional school system is personal finance. It should be mandatory. It should be mandatory not just as a single semester. It should be a multiple year course that's treated with as much seriousness as high level mathematics. Not something that's just taught for a few months. Seriously taught. And then on the other side of it, I think health should be more seriously taught. And when I'm talking health, I'm talking not just physical health, but mental, conflict resolution, social health, emotional health. How do we help a depressed friend? Things that are essential just to get along with and to thrive as a social society. These skill sets are definitely required, but they're generally shortchanged in a traditional school system.
Awesome. You are perfectly correct here. I have a lot of questions in my mind, and they keep on coming while I'm talking to you. One thing I just wanted to know from you, because I can see you're not very active on the social media. And however, you've got so many books already behind you now. I've seen so many authors now, whoever are writing the books, they are, let's say, marketing their publishing on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, and everywhere. But you haven't done it so far. Probably you will do it in future. But how have you grown? Even in the same era that social media was there, how have you grown your business, like your writings and your or is it just word of mouth that you've got those speaking gigs? What was the growth factor behind all this?
Yeah, good question. It probably was word of mouth, and I do actually use LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is one where I actually do get a fair amount of business through LinkedIn. And generally what will happen is if I promote that, or I talk about a talk that I just gave in Dubai, what often ends up happening is there are people that perhaps they've thought about having me speak at their company and they've had that in the back of their mind, but then they go to LinkedIn and they see that, oh, he just gave a talk in Dubai last night. Oh, you know what? We've always wanted to have him speak, and he's already in the vicinity. Well, let's reach out. And so that actually happens, and with a fair amount of success. So I probably don't spend as much time as I could to maximize my exposure, as you've noticed with social media. And there's a balance here for me as well. So at this stage, I'm also very protective of my time. And I realize that time is, and always is for everybody, it's the only non-renewable resource that we have. And so I, like anybody else, can get sucked into the vortex of the internet. You know, I've done the same thing as most people where you can end up just spending so much time wasted on certain things and realize, well, I've gone into the black hole here, and so much time has just passed, and that's time that's never going to come back. So, I try to be quite cautious about the time that I actually allot to doing things on social media because I know it can actually be a time suck. So I'm trying to create a balance. I like to keep enough exposure such that I'm able to get uh, as much business as I want and be selective with that while not going overboard on it.
Awesome. Okay, so one of your strengths, I would say, in speaking as well, is about retirement. So, what are the factors I would ask you that people skip or don't consider while thinking about retirement? There, we always think, listen about this 4% rule. You can elaborate on that as well. But what are the factors I just want to understand from you? People are mostly neglecting or they're not taking into consideration while planning their retirements.
I think the interesting thing is that there are so many people that don't think about it at all. That's the thing I find so fascinating. So I'm taking for example, my wife is for the next 8 months, she's teaching Spanish at an international school here in Sofia, Bulgaria. And I'm going to be careful with how I say this in case any of them are actually listening to this. But some of her colleagues who I've got to know and end up spending a little bit of time with, I've noticed that they live for the day. They live for the here and the now. They're not even thinking about the future. And I don't always want people asking me questions about finances. So in the case of these three women that I'm thinking of, they don't even actually know that I'm a financial journalist, a financial speaker, and a financial writer. They don't even know. And sometimes I really like that. But as I'm talking to them and I'm watching their behaviors, I'm realizing that, and I'll ask some questions. I'll ask some questions, and I'll realize. So we have these three women who actually aren't saving anything at all for their retirement, and there are a lot of people who live for the moment but don't recognize that they are like a steward for the older person that lies within them, and that one day they are also going to be old. And so I think it's in the United States, I remember that there was a company that was trying to contribute to their 401k plan. So it was basically a retirement planning plan. And what they did was these experiments where they actually ended up with this avatar that would show you as an older person. And when people could actually visualize themselves as an older person, they actually ended up investing more money, or they had a higher likelihood of even investing money into those 401k platforms. And I think that's a big part of it, Wally, is seeing yourself as this older person and looking into the future so that you do recognize that this is a really important thing to do.
Right. You're absolutely right. So basically, apart from the mistakes that you're thinking, because I was thinking about healthcare, which is something which people, especially in UAE, if they're thinking about retiring, they don't consider that. And considering the insurance cost nowadays, it's skyrocketing, especially once you're in your 60s and even 50s. It's very expensive. So people generally are not taking because they're usually doing their own 9 to 5, and through that 9 to 5 they're having all kind of facilities, and later on once they leave their job they won't have those facilities. So yeah, so this is one thing. Of course, there are people who do not think about retirement at all, considering if an expat is there, and especially someone who's living in the UAE, they don't have any taxes. And once you don't have taxes, you don't have, you should not also consider, let's say, if you're not privileged enough to go back to Canada for healthcare. If you're not you're not coming from that kind of country, you should be funding your healthcare through your own monthly income, and that too is without tax right now. So there is a compulsion on you to save that money if you're not paying the taxes. So this is something which is always in my mind about retirement. So once you are giving talks, what kind of audience you are finding out nowadays, and what kind of questions they are asking? Because sometimes some people would be listening this for the first time once you are saying these kind of things, and it's something which is alien to them. So how are they reacting to your talks? Is it positive,
With
or
e-
sometimes I know that there are people which are negative as well?
you know, I've been lucky. I think generally the people that come to hear me speak are already open-minded enough. So it is, to a point, self-selective. But I will tell you a funny story. There's a seminar that I do for companies, and it's called What's Your Financial Freedom Number? And the idea of being financially free, what I tell people is, it's that point at which you could retire, or it's that point at which you are working and enjoying your work, but you don't actually need to be working. So yeah, financial freedom date. I ask people to think about a financial freedom date, this date in the future. So again, it could be your retirement date or that date at which you're just working for enjoyment because you like it. So anyway, I was giving this talk, the financial freedom, the financial freedom number talk. What's your financial freedom? And taking people through a process where, first of all, you look at, say, okay, if you were to retire today, right now, how much would you want to be spending on an annual basis? And so you get people to think about that. And then they all write down what their number would be. And most people are going to be putting down a number that's somewhat similar to the income that they have now, although it's different for everybody, because some will say, I'm going to retire in India, or I'm going to retire in Mexico. Others are saying, I'm going to retire in New York City, even though I'm currently working in India or Mexico. So it's different for everybody. Some are going to need more retirement income than others just to get by. Some will need far less. So that's why personal finance is so personal. But what we do is we figure out what that number is. If you were to retire today, how much would you want? And then I show them how to index that to inflation, to show them that, okay, let's say that number is $40,000. All right, well, that shouldn't be your goal, $40,000 worth of income, if it's going to be 20 years from now, because we are going to get inflation between now and then. So if inflation averages, let's say, we know historically averaged about 3.5% a year, sometimes a lot higher, sometimes a lot lower. But if we look at 100-year periods, for developed world markets, it's usually around 3.5% as an average. So then we sort of work that out. So $40,000 of income today, let's say it ends up being future equivalent buying power 22 years from now needs 60 grand, 60,000 instead of the 40. Okay, so 60,000 would have to be 4% of your portfolio's value. So if you're going to withdraw 60% from your investment portfolio, if you're going to withdraw $60,000 from an investment portfolio, your investment portfolio has to be worth 25 times that, such that that $60,000 is 4% of the portfolio value. So that's based on something known as the 4% rule, or the 4% rule of thumb. That indicates that you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio in the first year of your retirement, and that becomes your base amount. Every year thereafter, regardless of how your portfolio performs, whether it goes up, down, or sideways, you withdraw a little bit more to match that year's inflation level. So anyway, for this woman, she took let's say it was $60,000. She multiplied it by 25. And I can't remember exactly the parameters for her, because everybody does this personally. They're all with their laptops working out what their numbers are. So I'm not putting numbers in anybody's mouth here. I'm asking them to work this out. So anyway, when you ask about being angry, this woman, she stands up. I still remember it. It's in Bangkok. She stands up. There's an auditorium of, like, I don't know, 400 people. You can just see she stands up. She's like, and she's breathing like this. And she says, "Hey, are you telling me that I need $2.5 million to retire?" And I said, "No, you told you that." That was the only
Because
example
it's
for
your number.
somebody. That was your number. You did your math based on what your goals were. So that
Yes.
was the only person who actually got angry.
Really? Yeah, because whenever I talk to people, cars, homes, affordability, this there's a famous rule of 20, 10, 40 rule for the cars as well as something like that. And when I talked about that, they were saying, "What are you out of your mind? In that way, we won't be able to afford a car at all in our lifetime." So I said, "This is the rule. If you want to carry on, otherwise you can just take loans and enjoy your life. It's not a problem. If you're asking me for a rule of thumb, this is the rule of thumb." So this is the 25 times. It's sometimes people really get angry at the numbers, and but once they see this is how it should be, maybe then they realize it. At least there should be a realization once the things settle down. I want to ask you, how do you suggest for investment? Like, what are the vehicles that you propose in terms of investment? Is it stock picking, or is it simple index fund, especially for the expats? I'm sure we have a huge debate for that, or not debate. It's a long answer, but let's say if you can summarize this thing.
Well, when we look at peer-reviewed economic evidence, if you have an investment portfolio of low-cost ETFs, and if it's globally diversified, you will beat 90% to 95% of professional money managers over your lifetime. So that's an irrefutable fact. There is no academic study that refutes that. That just is the reality. The interesting thing is that there are so many people that say, well, if it beats 90% of investment professionals, 10% of investment professionals must beat it. Therefore, because I'm smart, I'm going to be among those 10%. And so they'll choose to invest that way. So I can't argue against that because people will do what people will do. But the interesting thing is that, say you take a specific decade and you look at a professional money manager that actually outperformed a portfolio of indexes. And a decade is actually a short term. 10 years is not long term, it's short term. 10 years is long term for a Cocker Spaniel. It's not long term for a person. If we look then at something like the SPIVA persistence scorecard, which looks at what were the top performing fund managers, or what were the top performing funds run by really smart fund managers, what were they over the last, say, 5 years? And let's then go out 2 years and see what percentage of those top performing fund managers are still among the top performers. Invariably, because of something called reversion to the mean, the vast majority of them, and we're talking like 96% of them, are no longer among the top performers just 2 years forward. And most people will actually buy what's gone up in price. And it's a little bit backwards, but it's what human beings do. They'll say, I'm going to buy that fund because it's performing really well. There's no such thing as the present tense when it comes to investing. Nothing is performing well. There's only the past. If you're looking at it today, all you see is how it performed up until today, but you can't see the future. So you can't say it is performing well. And it's largely then also irrelevant because of the reversion to the mean. So how do I invest my money? I just put the probability of success in my favor by building a globally diversified, low-cost portfolio of ETFs. I add money to it whenever I have the money. And as a result of that, I end up buying a greater number of units when the market drops and a lower number of units when the market rises. As a result of that, I pay lower than average price over time for my stock market investments, which helps to increase my money weighted return over time. It's not a thing where you're having to speculate. It's just simply whenever I have money, I add it. I don't try and think about what's the best time to add it. Markets move up far more often than they move down. So invariably, if you're the kind of person who tries to wait for a market pullback or a drop before you add money, most of the time that ends up biting you in the butt because most of the time markets move up, not down. So you end up missing an opportunity of having your money actually end up growing to its fullest capacity. So I started to invest when I was 19, and I've been doing this where I've been adding money whenever I've had it ever since then.
And I've also like whenever somebody asks me this, I always tell them that you are not doing anything active in this. This is all complete passive. One should invest the energy in the active income that they want to generate, either through their day job, either through their let's say whatever side incomes they're getting, but all of it should be considered as active. And if you try to beat the market, then it's coming towards the active part of your income stream, or let's say your job. So if you're considering passive, then this is passive thing, just diversified ETFs, buying it whenever you have money, or let's say you make a system of dollar cost averaging every month, every week, or whatever the case is, then it should be fine. You've mentioned earlier about something related to financial, I won't say crimes, but they are misrepresentations. So can you shed some light on that, like in especially in terms of insurances and a lot of those kind of products, how to find out those, uh, I would say scams as well in some cases, because the sales agents will try to lure you in a wrong way. So how do you counter that?
Yeah, there are armies, I call them armies, of financial salespeople. They will be well dressed, they will be articulate, they will seem to be really kind, but they will sell you financial products that most commonly are created by insurance companies and have high hidden fees to the point where it's virtually impossible for you to beat inflation over a long period of time. They lock investors into these products with redemption penalties for pulling out before a predetermined date. And the problem here is that, generally speaking, when someone sells you, the reason there are armies of people trying to sell you these products is because of the commissions that are paid to the people who actually sell them. So if I sold you one of these products and I convinced you, let's say you have pretty decent income, and I convince you to invest $2,000 a month into this thing, I will basically get, as the salesperson, 18 months worth of your contributions. I will get the equivalent of that as my commission if I've sold that to you. That's massive. And I'll split part of that with my brokerage, but I, as the salesperson, would get the vast majority of that. So now the insurance company has given me a huge amount of money up front. So now, to recoup that money, they need you to continue to invest in this scheme for the duration of the 25 years. And they'll charge you really, really high fees. So the insurance company can eventually not only recoup the commission that they've paid the sales guy, but they've made a substantial profit as well. So when you start investing in this thing, the first 18 months worth of your investments, even though it will tell you what your market value is actually worth, it's not worth anything. It's a smoke and mirrors show. They'll often give you a surrender value on it as well, which will be significantly less. That's the actual value of your account. The market value is complete garbage. It's not true. It's only the surrender value that's true. So the sooner you pull out of this thing, the better. And there are a lot of people that don't want to pull out because they realize they'll lose several $1,000s. But the longer you stay in it, the more money you will lose. The opportunity cost is massive. It's far better to just walk away, take the financial hit, and then invest that money properly in a globally diversified portfolio of ETFs.
Awesome. What are your thoughts on crypto?
I think everybody has their own personal thoughts on that. And crypto becomes really popular at times when it has risen a lot in price. And that's like anything. When houses have risen a lot in price, everyone wants to buy them. When the US stock market funds or US stocks rise a lot in value, everybody wants to buy them. And for me, this will be probably quite contentious, because especially if you are actually in the UAE, so there's a much higher concentration of people that like to trade cryptocurrencies in the UAE than there is in most parts of the world. It's something that I am not comfortable with doing myself. I'm more aligned philosophically with Warren Buffett on cryptocurrency in that I believe that it's a medium of exchange. So it's something that I think too in the future will be even more predominant with respect to actually being able to purchase things with. I don't, at this point in my life, I don't really know anybody yet who's actually bought anything with cryptocurrency. I'm sure people have. I know people have, but none of my friends have at this stage, which is kind of interesting. When the iPhone was released, within a year, all of my friends had one. Now, that was something that had huge adoption, and the adoption was fast. When something like Netflix came to be, within a couple of years, everybody had a subscription. That's a massive practical adoption. Bitcoin's been around for 13, 15 years-ish. At this point, although people are using it as a medium of exchange, I don't know anybody yet personally who has. So the adoption of it hasn't taken hold the same way adoption of, the internet was, or
I
different
agree. I agree.
different
And
products.
I always give the example of AI in that because AI just came like 2 years back in mainstream, and it has impacted every single person on the earth. And it
Mm-hmm.
has impacted me a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
has been around, or let's say crypto has been around for last 13 years. I haven't seen a single use case apart from the medium of exchange. It's easier to send money to someone, let's say in a country which is having some sanctions, but that is something which is I won't say that, but it is not legit as of now. Now that you president of the US is saying things, positive things about crypto, I think it has fueled it more. Apart from that, I also don't have any insights on why would someone invest in something like gold. Is something which is commodity, and it has some worth in people's eye. That's why people are buying it. Its price can go up and down. It is also having some industrial use as well. But Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, apart from the medium of exchange, it doesn't have anything else. So that is my point of view in that as well. Oh, we've been almost into 1 hour now, and I really thank you for being here. What are your final thoughts, and what do you want to say to the audience who are watching you now?
My final thoughts, I think, are wow, I think all of us just reflect on treating other people as we want to be treated ourselves. I think the most important part always comes back down to relationships more than money. And money is just a part of this whole process. But taking time and setting goals to spend time with people that you love is hugely important. And sometimes we get into a really busy pattern, we get into really busy parts of our lives, and sometimes we forget the importance of connecting with people that we love and making a goal to set time aside so that we do that. On the investment side, I would say that you're never going to be younger than you are right now. And so if you haven't started to invest for your future, now is the best time to do it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, and hopefully I think this podcast will do really well on my channel, and if it does, whatever the case is, I think we should connect again. It's so many things that I need to ask you, but I think it's going to be a very long episode if we do everything in this same stretch. So better to have different topics, videos, and different time. And I hope that you come often in videos as well, because so far we can see your posts on LinkedIn, but not too many videos. Maybe you need to post more of those, especially the talks that you're doing, because I learn a lot from those as well.
Thank you, Wali. I appreciate that.
Then thank you very much. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.